Hello, my friends, and welcome to Night Whisper. This is a quiet place where we drift together into unanswered skies, slowly, calmly, and without fear. Here, we don't rush toward conclusions. We listen, we observe, and we let the mystery breathe. If these stories bring you a sense of calm or keep you company through the night, you're always welcome to stay with us. Subscribing gently helps this space grow, and it allows more quiet minds to find their way here. You can also leave a soft, like if the story helps you relax, unwind, or feel less alone beneath the night sky. And if any thoughts rise as you listen, you are welcome to share them in the comments below. And just out of quiet curiosity, where are you listening from tonight? I love seeing how far these whispers travel through the dark. Chapter 1. The passport that should not exist. Airports are places built on agreement. Everyone inside them travelers, staff, pilots, guards moves according to shared assumptions. That a name printed on paper belongs to a real person. That a stamp means permission. That borders exist not just on maps, but in orderly systems that rarely fail. Late at night, those assumptions feel even stronger. The lights hum softly overhead. Floors gleam with the polish of endless footsteps. Screens flicker with destinations that sound far away even when they're familiar. Somewhere, a distant announcement echoes, then dissolves into the low breathing of the building itself. People drift through this space, half awake, half dreaming. Bodies move forward while minds linger behind, or leap ahead to beds, reunions, obligations, new beginnings. Airports are thresholds, but they are also lullabies. They tell us that everything is under control, and for the most part, that's true. Nothing unusual is supposed to happen here. Imagine standing still for a moment, letting the crowd pass you by. Suitcases roll like steady waves. Shoes tap out quiet rhythms. Voices blend into an indistinct murmur, neither urgent nor comme just constant. You could close your eyes and trust that the world would keep moving correctly without you. That trust is what makes the story ahead so unsettling. Because this story doesn't begin with danger. It begins with confidence. At an immigration counter, an officer waits. He has done this thousands of times. He knows the shape of fatigue in travelers' faces. He recognizes nervous hands, impatient, size-rehearsed smiles. Patterns reveal themselves quickly when you've seen enough people crossing lines that matter. A man steps forward. Nothing about him disrupts the rhythm. He is well-dressed, neither flashy nor careless. His posture is relaxed, shoulders easy, gaze steady. He carries himself like someone accustomed to being exactly where he is supposed to be. He offers his passport without hesitation. The officer takes it. The cover feels familiar. The pages bend the way they should. The ink hasn't bled or faded unnaturally. This is not the stiff paper of something newly made, nor the fragile thinness of a cheap imitation. It carries the quiet weight of use. Pages turn. Stamps appear. Dates, entry marks from places that exist beyond the glass walls of the airport cities. With weather, streets, history, everything aligns, until it doesn't. The officer pauses on the line marked nationality. Not because of shock, because of interruption. The word printed there does not match any mental category he possesses. It doesn't resemble a misspelling. It is not an unfamiliar subdivision or an outdated political entity. It sits alone, unanchored, taured. The officer reads it again. His eyes trace the letters carefully, as if precision might summon recognition. His fingers adjust the page, catching the light at a different angle. Still nothing. He looks up. The man meets his gaze easily. There is no tension in his face. Just be open and relaxed. If anything, there is mild curiosity, like someone waiting for a routine to resume after a brief pause. The officer clears his throat. He asks the question, gently, the way professionals do when they assume confusion rather than conflict. The man answers without hesitation. His voice carries assurance, not forced, not defensive, simply certain. He speaks as someone would when stating the location of their birthplace or the spelling of their own name. The officer listens and listens again. Something subtle shifts in the room. Not alarm, not fear, but a tension, a quiet awareness that the script has slipped, that the next line has not been rehearsed. The officer reaches for a reference book. Then another. A map unfolds across the desk, its creases worn smooth by years of hands, searching for clarity. The man watches calmly. Time stretches. The officer traces. Coastlines, borders, mountain ranges. He follows familiar contours until his finger stops where something should be but isn't. There is a country there. A small one, a quiet one, nestled between France and Spain, but it is not called Taured. The officer looks up again. The man leans forward slightly now, his brow tightening not with fear but with disbelief, the kind that comes when a trusted fact is challenged by someone who should know better. He gestures toward the map. Right there, he says, that place. The officer explains carefully that the country shown there has a different name. The man shakes his head, not dismissively. Genuinely. That name, he says, belongs nowhere. He has never heard it. He has crossed this border many times. He knows this region. His country has stood for centuries. As he speaks, something emerges, not drama, but injury. A quiet offense, as though the world has suddenly failed a basic test of memory. From his perspective, this isn't a puzzle. It's absurd. The room feels smaller now, though no walls have moved. Additional officials gather, drawn not by urgency but by curiosity. They listen. They check. They repeat the same process, expecting resolution to appear through repetition. It doesn't. The man answers every question with consistency. His details align with themselves. His story does not shift to accommodate disbelief. If anything, his certainty sharpens, not into anger, but into insistence. He speaks of his homeland the way people speak of places they love without realizing it, casually, assuredly, as something that does not require proof, because it has never been absent, and that is what unsettles them. Liars adjust. Confused people hesitate, but this man stands firmly inside his version of the world. When he opens his wallet, the unease deepens. Inside are bills and coins that echo familiarity without matching it. The designs resemble European currency in shape and quality, but the symbols feel like near memories close enough to recognize, distant enough to evade certainty. They do not look crude. They do not look rushed. They look official. More documents follow: a driver's license, business cards, identification papers. Every piece agrees with the others. Everyone names the same country. Taured. Outside confirmation fails again and again. The hotel reservation he mentions cannot be found. The company he represents does not exist. Every attempt to anchor his story to the shared world collapses quietly, like a bridge vanishing in fog. Still, the man does not retreat. He does not search for excuses. He does not grow frantic. Instead, his frustration turns outward. He asks how an entire system could forget a nation, how trained officials could be unaware of a place that has always been there. His questions are not wild. They are precise, logical within his understanding of reality, and that is the most uncomfortable part, because for a moment, no one can prove him wrong without relying on the very assumptions he is challenging. Eventually, a decision is made, not out of punishment, but containment. He will be held overnight, observed, given time for clarity to return either his or theirs. He is escorted to a nearby hotel. The room is high above the ground. The windows do not open. There is no balcony. No obvious exit. Guards take position outside the door, not aggressively, but attentively. The man enters alone. Night settles. Inside the room, time thickens. The city hums distantly, muted by glass and height. Somewhere below, lights move like slow constellations. Above, the ceiling holds its quiet vigil. What does a person think when the world disagrees with them? Does Tao arrive first? Or does certainty cling tighter? No one knows what the man does in that room. Whether he sleeps, whether he paces, whether he stares out into the unfamiliar version of a city he knows too well. What is known is this: Morning comes. The guards open the door. The room is empty. No man. No passport. No wallet. No currency. No trace of departure. The bed is undisturbed. The windows remain sealed. The guards insist no one pass them during the night. There is no explanation that satisfies everyone, and in that absence quiet, unresolved, the story takes its first true breath. Because now, the question is no longer about documents or maps. It is about where certainty goes, when it has nowhere left to stand. And somewhere between disbelief and fascination, a legend begins to form softly, patiently waiting for someone to repeat it again. Chapter 2, Between Maps and Memory. The morning after the disappearance, the airport settles back into its usual rhythm, as if nothing had ever slipped sideways. Travelers shuffle forward with weary faces, passports stamped and verified, luggage wheels clicking in steady percussion. Announcements hum softly, barely noticed. Sunlight pools across polished floors, tracing the shapes of chairs and columns in a gentle, indifferent geometry. And yet, for those who remember, nothing is the same. The memory of the man lingers not like a photograph, precise and clear, but like a shadow that curves against the edge of thought, an echo that refuses to fade. Officials whisper in corners, questioning their own observations. Did he exist, or was he some trick of imagination, conjured from exhaustion and routine? The uncertainty sticks, sticky as the summer air that clings to the skin of the city outside. This is where the story begins to fracture. Details waver, shift, and fold into speculation. Some say it happened in 1954, others in 1959, and still others in 1960. The man's appearance changes depending on who tells the tale, sometimes in his 30s, sometimes older, sometimes with a beard that shades his intent, sometimes clean-shaven and composed. He speaks multiple languages. Perhaps he speaks 10, perhaps 14. The world bends around his voice, pliable to the memory of those who encountered him. The country Taured moves to. In some retellings, it occupies the space where Andorra rests, snug between France and Spain. In others, it drifts across the Sahara, stretching through territories vaguely associated with the Tuareg people. Sometimes it is a flourishing democracy, sometimes a shadowy nation of spies and secret deals. Borders are not constant. Memory reshapes them like clay in waiting hands. You can almost picture it. A map unfolding under a desk lamp, the edges curling, borders shifting, names blinking in and out like distant stars. To the observer, reality feels firm, stable, inevitable. But for the man from Taured, and for those who remember him, reality was less a solid ground and more a tapestry that can tear, weave, and fray without warning. And yet, in the midst of uncertainty, there is a remarkable consistency. He arrives in Tokyo, not out of drama, but habit. He carries documents that look plausible because they are crafted carefully. Stamps overlap in layered patterns. Visas from cities across continents. IBAN currency. Wind unfolded temps. Recognition familiar shapes. Unfamiliar names. A trick of the mind made manifest. He presents himself not as a spectacle, but as someone navigating a world he knows intimately. Officials scramble. They call hotels, tracing reservations that vanish. They reach the company he claims to represent, and every inquiry collapses into silence. It is as if the very world has hidden its tracks, leaving only questions and half-glimpsed certainty. And yet, through it all, the man remains composed. He does not plead, beg, or panic. He does not insist beyond reason. He simply states facts as he knows them, facts that are not recognized here. And in that calm assertion lies the tension that gnaws quietly at the edges of comprehension. Because the moment someone insists with quiet authority against overwhelming disbelief, the room itself seems to pause, holding its breath, waiting for reality to catch up. Later, authorities make a decision they believe is prudent. They detain him not cruelly, but carefully placing him in a room high above the city. Guards stand outside, alert but not aggressive. Doors lock. Windows are sealed, and the man, unshaken, enters alone. Time behaves differently inside that room. Hours stretch and bend. The city hums below, muted and distant. Air moves lazily across the floor. Shadows cling to corners, stretching thin, then receding. You might imagine him standing by the window, hands resting lightly on the sill, staring out at streets that feel both familiar and strangely alien. Perhaps he walks, pacing with measured steps. Perhaps he sits, thinking through memories of a place that exists in one world but is denied in another. Night drapes over Tokyo like velvet. The hum of fluorescent light softens. Somewhere beyond the walls, travelers sleep in hotels, unaware of what lies above them. Time slows, and with it, understanding. Some truths, it seems, can only be observed in pauses between ordinary moments. Morning comes. The guards unlock the door. The room is empty. No man. No passport. No wallet. No documents. No disturbance. No trace of human passage. The window remains sealed. The bed untouched. The air still. And yet, the absence feels heavier than presence. Questions multiply. How could a man disappear from a room so securely monitored? How could a story that began so quietly ripple outward, gathering fascination with each retelling? The disappearance is no longer about passports or maps. It is about perception itself, about the boundaries of what we accept as real. News spreads slowly, at first in whispers, tenning print. Officials recount the facts with care, hedging against the impossible. Stories appear in newspapers, then columns in distant cities, each version slightly different, shaped by memory, perspective, and the need for narrative. Some journalists call it a mystery, some a prank, others a cautionary tale about human error. And as these stories circulate, something curious happens. Memory begins to play tricks. Witnesses disagree not on the essential fact of his presence, but on the small details. The tone of his voice, the shape of his features, the color of his tie. Each recollection adapts to the teller's understanding, each version bending the original into something new, something that feels familiar even as it drifts from reality. In some retellings, he vanishes through a window no human could reach. In others, he simply evaporates, leaving nothing behind. The city, the airport, the very structure of time itself becomes a participant in the story, a quiet accomplice in a myth that grows without force. As they cut us past, the legend evolves. By the 1960s, newspapers sensationalize the event. By the 1970s, authors embellish it. By the 1980s, paranormal books immortalize the man as something extraordinary, placing him somewhere between dream and history. And when the internet blooms, the story spreads across continents, adapted to new media. Animated videos recreate the moment of the passport, cinematic music underscoring impossibility. Maps are slashed across tables, voices argue in shadowed rooms, and the man from Taured lives again with each retelling. The beauty of this legend is not in the impossible act itself, but in how human imagination amplifies it. Details shift to reflect the fears, desires, and curiosities of each era. A Cold War world sees espionage, subterfuge, and spies. A digital age sees glitches, deep fakes, and alternate realities. Each version resonates because it aligns with what people already feel. The fragile certainty of borders, the precariousness of identity, the tantalizing idea that one small anomaly could crack open the world we think we know. And through it all, one constant remains: the quiet certainty of the man. In every version, in every memory, Ace stands firm. He knows the world differently, and his confidence challenges those around him. That is the true enchantment of the story. It is not merely that he disappears, but that he exists in the minds of others so vividly that his absence becomes more remarkable than his presence ever could have been. As night falls over Tokyo again, long after the headlines have faded and the airport hums with the rhythm of routine travelers, the memory lingers, not as evidence, not as proof, not even as a fully coherent story, but as a question whispered across time and space. What would you believe if everything you trusted could be questioned in a single, calm moment? And with that thought, the legend of the man from Taured continues, quietly, patiently shaping itself, not through spectacle, but through the slow, deliberate unfolding of curiosity. Some stories are not about answers. They are about the space between certainty and wonder. Chapter 3. The man behind the myth. If the first chapter of the story is about wonder and the second about absence, then this chapter is about understanding. Not understanding in the way a simple answer resolves a question, but understanding as an unfolding, delicate process, like sunlight brushing across a window pane, revealing dust motes dancing in its path. It's about tracing the roots of a legend, following the threads backward, and noticing how each detail, however small, contributes to the shape the story ultimately takes. Because beneath every myth, there's a person. In this case, the man who inspired generations of speculation was not a traveler from another universe, nor a time traveler lost between realities. He was a human being. His name, or at least one of the names he used, was John Allen Kuchar Ziggurat, a name that itself shifts depending on which account you encounter, just as the story's dates and locations drift over time. Born around 1924, possibly in the United States, Ziggurat's early life is as obscured and fragmented as the myth he would later inspire. Some say his origins are European, others suggest Asia. Perhaps he was a citizen of many nations, in the sense that stories can claim many truths at once. What we do know is that Ziggurat was exceptionally skilled in the art of perception. He spoke multiple languages. Some accounts suggest 10, others 14. He could adjust accents, tone, and mannerisms effortlessly, moving through social situations as a practiced navigator might move through shifting sands. He understood how to project authority, charm, or intimidation when each was required. In a world still reeling from the aftermath of global war, where borders were fragile and governments cautious, this ability was more than clever, it was power. Imagine him arriving at an airport in October 1959, alongside a woman identified as his wife, whose origins were recorded as Korean, though her full identity remained elusive. On first impression, they would have seemed ordinary. He carried his documents with confidence, handed them over with a natural ease, spoke with clarity and fluency in languages that were not his apparent native tongue. To the casual observer, nothing about him invited suspicion. But then the passport. It was not the polished product of a government printing office. It was oversized, handmade, its pages filled with stamps and symbols that looked official but were entirely fabricated. The issuing country was listed as Taured or Taured. The capital, Tamanrasset, was a real city in Algeria, a subtle flourish of borrowed authenticity that gave the document an almost credible weight. The language printed inside was not a cipher, dialect, or obscure regional tongue. It was invented, a string of Latin letters arranged in sentences that conveyed nothing but appeared meaningful to those untrained in linguistics. And yet, somehow it worked. Somehow Ziggurat secured a legitimate visa from the Japanese embassy in Taipei just a week before his arrival. That single, authentic stamp, a small but crucial proof of legitimacy, was the hinge upon which the entire story turned. With it, the impossible began to feel plausible. Once in Japan, Ziggurat became an artist of persuasion. He wove narratives about intelligence work, sometimes claiming affiliation with the CIA, other times with the FBI, and occasionally suggesting links to Egyptian forces under Gamal Abdel Nasser. He tailored his story to match the expectations and fears of each listener. To one, he was a man with influence. To another, a man with secrets. Each audience received what it needed, and Ziggurat delivered it with confidence, precision, and an almost theatrical subtlety. The performances continued until the practicalities of life intruded. In January 1960, he attempted to cash forged travelers' checks worth 200,000 yen, a substantial sum at the time. This was his undoing. Institutions noticed. Investigations were launched. Officials traced the trail of documents, interrogated his companions, and followed each lead until the careful artifice unraveled. The man who had seemed untraceable, who had moved through languages, nations, and identities with fluidity, was suddenly grounded in reality by the simple mechanics of finance. Arrested by the Tokyo Metropolitan Police under the guidance of investigator Atsuyuki, Sasa Ziggurat faced the legal machinery of a world he had manipulated with ease. Embassies were contacted, governments questioned. No one recognized Taured, no one could verify his claims. The illusion collapsed under scrutiny, but even in collapse, He retained a certain magnetism, a kind of quiet drama that lingered beyond the courtroom. During his trial, in a moment both shocking and strangely poetic, Zegras attempted to end his life using a shard of glass. He slashed his veins in open court, crying out that he wished to die. Guards restrained him. Doctors intervened. He survived, and the image of the multilingual fraudster, bleeding yet composed, cemented his aura in the public imagination, not as a supernatural being, but as a man whose life had already become legend through the contradictions of human perception. Zegras's eventual release, after serving his sentence, marked the beginning of another disappearance, not from a room, as the myth suggests, but from the historical record itself. He was deported to Hong Kong. His wife returned to South Korea, and after that, the trail grew cold. No confirmed sightings, no documented death, no final confession. And in that absence, the legend found its oxygen. What makes Zegras fascinating is not merely his deception, but the way the world responded. A Canadian newspaper misprinted the name of his country as Taured, a small typographical error that would have profound consequences for the story. British politicians referenced the case to critique passport security. Authors and storytellers exaggerated, shifted dates, and adapted details. By the time paranormal writers embraced the tale, decades later, Zegras was no longer a clever con artist. He was a traveler between worlds, a figure suspended between possibility and impossibility. Psychologically, Zegras fits a familiar archetype: the charismatic manipulator who understands the mechanics of belief and the gaps in human attention. Sociologically, his success illuminates vulnerabilities in post-war bureaucratic systems. Paperwork, signatures, stamp small formalities that we trust to maintain order proved fragile in the face of skillful deception. Culturally, his story illustrates a powerful truth. Reality does not need to be broken to create myth. Confusion, repetition, and curiosity are sufficient. And so the man from Taured, the figure who fascinates and mystifies, is less about other dimensions and more about us, about how stories grow, spread, and adapt. He exists in the narrative space between fact and interpretation, where each retelling reshapes memory, where each listener adds a brushstroke to a picture that never quite existed in the first place. Perhaps the most remarkable element is the quiet persistence of the story. Even when evidence is presented, even when dates, locations, and identities are clarified, the legend endures. It is a mirror reflecting our desire to wonder, our readiness to embrace the improbable, and our inclination to imagine worlds just beyond the edge of understanding. Through Zegras, the story of Taured teaches a subtle, profound lesson: that human imagination is both fragile and resilient, that a single individual, armed with wit, patience, and audacity, can craft an experience that outlives his own physical presence, that myths are not born from impossibility alone, but from the fertile interplay of perception, memory, and storytelling. And in that gentle reflection, there is a calm lesson for the listener. We are invited not to chase proof of other worlds, but to notice how easily belief forms, how stories can take root in empty spaces, and how patience, observation, and curiosity shape our understanding of reality. The man behind the myth is gone, but his legacy persists, carried not on the printed page or in archived documents, but in the quiet spaces of thought, where imagination meets possibility. It is here, in these reflections, that the story softens, opening a space for contemplation. For even in the clarity of fact, there is room for wonder, not the kind that startles or terrifies, but the kind that hums beneath the surface, a gentle curiosity that asks us to question, to ponder, and to imagine. Perhaps this is why the legend survived, because it is less about a man, a passport, or a country that never existed. It is about the small, delicate spaces where belief and imagination intersect, and where a single story, carefully told, can ripple outward through decades and across continents. And as the evening drifts over the city and the hum of ordinary life resumes its measured rhythm, one can almost hear the faint echo of footsteps in an empty hotel corridor, the brush of a coat against polished floors, and the soft whisper of a name Zegras carried through time by memory, myth, and the unending human desire to believe. Some stories are not about the people who lived them, but about the ways we carry them forward. And now, we begin to explore not only the story of Zegras, but the echoes it leaves in the human mind, the patterns it traces across time, and the quiet spaces where myth becomes almost indistinguishable from memory. Chapter 4. The passport that shaped belief. Even the most ordinary objects can become extraordinary when held in the right hands. A piece of paper, inked with stamps and borders, can carry worlds within it. This is the story of a passport. One passport that would come to shape legend, curiosity, and belief for decades to follow. It is a story not about magic, but about perception, about how the mundane can become marvelous when layered with intention, detail, and timing. Imagine a small office in Taipei in the autumn of 1959. The air is warm, slightly humid, with sunlight diffusing through blinds, casting stripes of gold and shadow across polished wooden floors. Officials move quietly, shuffling papers, stamping visas, and answering polite inquiries with routine efficiency. The city hums faintly outside the windows. Vendors culling, bicycles rolling along narrow streets, the occasional motor horn echoing from a distant road. In that ordinary environment, a man enters, calm, collected, unremarkable in appearance, yet carrying with him a vision that would ripple across oceans and decades. That man is John Allen Kucher Zegras. He approaches the counter, presenting a passport unlike any the clerks have ever seen. At first glance, it seems plausible. The binding is tidy, the paper thick and textured, with a slight wear that suggests travel. Pages are filled with stamps, some faded, some fresh, representing cities across Europe and Asia. The kind of details that usually reassure officials, but a closer inspection reveals the impossible. The issuing country does not exist. The name on the cover, Taured. Sometimes Taured is a careful invention, yet one rendered with convincing authority. The capital city listed. Tamanrah City's a real place, quietly borrowed from geography, to lend an air of authenticity. The language printed inside the pages is a meticulous arrangement of letters, entirely invented but formatted to resemble an official dialect. There is an artistry to the deception, a patience in the construction, a subtle genius in the way it balances believability with mystery. Consider how ordinary people perceive trust. We often rely on small cues: the weight of paper, the texture of ink, the familiarity of a place name. Zegras understood these cues intimately. He constructed a document that spoke to experience, that whispered, "This is legitimate," while simultaneously daring the observer to doubt. It was a passport designed not to fool by obvious fraud, but to quietly bend belief, one small detail at a time. In Tokyo, when he presented this passport at Haneda Airport, the reaction was measured but significant. Officials initially approached it with procedural calm. Checks were made, names repeated aloud, questions asked with polite curiosity. They expected ordinary travelers, routine interactions, and for a few moments, Zegras fit seamlessly into that expectation. His demeanor was composed, his speech fluent, his movements unhurried. But when attention turned to the country of origin, a ripple of unease spread across the room. Taured, a name unfamiliar to maps, atlases, or the collective memory of geography. It is here that we can pause and consider the subtle dynamics of belief. Why do some details hold weight, while others vanish in dismissal? How does a single word Taured become enough to make trained officials question their assumptions, to prompt a deeper inspection, to unsettle the rhythm of a normally predictable day? It is not the grand spectacle, nor the drama of confrontation that captures attention, but the quiet intrusion of something unplaceable, a mismatch between expectation and observation, a gentle tremor beneath the calm surface of routine. And Zegras knew this. He had rehearsed, anticipated, and engineered his interaction so that every element, the passport, his documents, his manner, worked together to amplify credibility while introducing mystery. He carried not just a piece of paper, but the intention behind it. He carried patience, understanding that time itself could become an ally. The process of verification, the careful scrutiny, the escalating curiosity, all of it was part of the performance. Beyond the airport, the passport carried stories, banknotes and coins, unfamiliar yet reminiscent of Europe, driver's licenses, business cards, official letters, all pointing back to a nation that did not exist outside his careful imagination. Each item was small, tangible proof, a tactile anchor for the illusion he wove. And when officials attempted to verify his claims through hotels, companies, and other authorities, the lack of corroboration only heightened the tension, the curiosity, the sense of subtle impossibility. The genius of the passport is in its quiet insistence. It does not shout. It does not demand belief. It waits. It allows space for doubt to coexist with fascination. The human mind, naturally drawn to patterns and explanations, begins to fill gaps, weaving narratives that merge observation with imagination. One missing hotel reservation, one unverified business affiliation, becomes enough to spark wonder. One document, crafted with care, transforms routine into legend. And yet, the passport is only the beginning. It is a threshold, a doorway into the narrative that will stretch across time. For each retelling, each reinterpretation, every detail the name. The stamps, the paper. The currency becomes a point of reflection, a piece of a puzzle that invites the mind to explore what is real, what is possible, and what is imagined. It is a lesson in subtlety, in the way ordinary objects can carry extraordinary meaning when placed in the right context, with intention, patience, and a deep understanding of human perception. Consider for a moment the power of ordinary human belief. We are creatures attuned to trust, to patterns, to authority. When a man arrives with a passport, documents, and demeanor that aligns with expectations, we grant him credibility. When one element seems out of place, we hesitate, question, and sometimes, quietly, our curiosity overtakes our skepticism. Zegris's passport is a study in this dynamic, a single artifact that demonstrates the fragile balance between trust and doubt, between fact and narrative. This is why, decades later, when stories of the man from Taured circulate online, the passport remains central. It is not merely a prop or an anecdote. It is the vessel of the legend, carrying with it all the subtle details that allowed imagination to flourish. Each stamp, each line of invented language, each borrowed city name becomes a point of connection for the human mind, inviting speculation, wonder, and the quiet, hypnotic tension that makes a story linger in thought, long after the moment is past. And in this reflection, there is a gentle reminder. Legends do not need grand battles or dramatic confrontations to take root. They grow in the spaces between expectation and observation, in the calm moments where curiosity awakens and the mind begins to trace patterns. They persist not because they are true, but because they are carefully crafted to feel possible, because they exist at the delicate intersection of imagination, perception, and memory. The passport, in this sense, is more than ink on paper. It is an invitation. It asks quietly, what if the world is not quite as fixed as we believe? What if there are spaces, subtle and hidden, where the impossible might brush against the ordinary? What if, in the careful reading of a document, the faint pattern of a story emerges that will echo for decades? And so, as we trace the steps of Zegris, the passport becomes a symbol, not of deception alone, but of human fascination, of the ways in which belief can be shaped, nurtured, and carried forward. It reminds us that the objects we handle, the papers we read, and the small details we notice, all have the power to shape narrative, spark curiosity, and invite wonder. Through this lens, the airport incident is not merely a story of an unusual visitor, but a meditation on perception, intention, and belief. The passport is a quiet instrument of imagination, a key to understanding why the tale of Taured has endured. Because even when the facts are revealed, even when the man behind the myth is identified, the power of that carefully crafted paper persists, whispering across time and space, inviting us to wonder once more. It is in these reflections that the story gains depth, revealing not only the mechanics of deception, but also the fragile beauty of human curiosity. The passport does not demand belief, but it nurtures it. It does not frighten, but it fascinates. It does not provide answers, but it encourages questions. And in doing so, it opens the door to a story that is as much about our minds as it is about the man who carried it. And so, the passport rests quietly in the imagination of every listener. Its pages, worn by time and story, carry more than a nation that never was. They carry the lesson that even the smallest objects, in the right hands, can shape belief, invite wonder, and echo across generations. Some objects are ordinary until we choose to see the worlds they contain. And with that, the journey moves from the artifact itself to the mind it touched, tracing how a single invention can ripple outward, shaping legends, perceptions, and the enduring question, what is real? Chapter 5. Tokyo's Moment of Pause. The city of Tokyo in 1959 is not the sprawling metropolis you might imagine in later decades. It is a place of quiet resilience, a city still recovering from the weight of history, yet humming softly with movement, commerce, and the subtle rhythms of everyday life. Streets are narrow and orderly, lined with low buildings, wooden facades, and the occasional neon sign beginning to glow in the evenings. The air carries the mingled scent of steaming tea, fresh paper from shops, and the faint trace of the river that winds gently through the city's edges. Life flows steadily, each day measured by small routines, familiar patterns, and the comforting predictability of ordinary encounters. On an otherwise ordinary morning, Haneda Airport experiences a subtle tremor of anomaly. A man steps through the automatic doors, moving with composed confidence. He is neither hurried nor distracted, yet his presence immediately bends the attention of the officials, who manage the flow of travelers. At first, he is just another passenger, a man in a crisp suit, polished shoes, and carefully combed hair. His gait is even, controlled, unremarkable, but in his hand rests a small booklet that will disrupt the rhythm of the day and, in a quiet way, invite the city to pause and reconsider its assumptions. That booklet, the passport of Taured, is more than paper. It is a portal. Each stamp, each printed line, each foreign symbol becomes a marker of possibility, and as officials examine it, the air seems to shift slightly, as though the ordinary hum of bureaucracy is momentarily suspended. They flip pages, cross-check details, whisper to colleagues. The names of familiar nations pass without hesitation, but when the impossible appears toward they hesitate. The city, even in that fleeting moment, seems to hold its breath. It is not a dramatic pause. There is no fanfare, no alarms, no chaos. Instead, there is a gentle, almost imperceptible slowing of motion, a collective curiosity that replaces routine procedure. People glance, nod, frown, adjust papers. A clerk points to an atlas. Another reaches for a map. The room hums with quiet deliberation. The man from Taured does not raise his voice, does not plead or protest. He waits patiently, his expression calm, even faintly amused, as if he already knows the outcome. In this pause, there is something profound. It is the rare moment when the ordinary world acknowledges the impossible, not with spectacle, but with subtle attention. It is a pause measured in glances, in held breaths, in the careful alignment of expectation and observation. It is a small, almost unnoticed miracle of human cognition, the point where curiosity begins to shape perception, and where perception begins to shape story. While the officials check and recheck the passport, the city beyond the airport continues its steady flow. Vendors open small stalls near the railway station. Children run lightly along alleyways, and bicycles roll past tea houses, clattering softly on stone pavements. The world itself seems unchanged, yet within the walls of Haneda Airport, a different rhythm emerges. Time feels stretched, elongated by focus, as if the moment itself has grown wider to accommodate uncertainty and wonder. The man's demeanor is key to this effect. He does not fidget, glance around nervously, or hurry the process. Each gesture is measured. Each answer is calm, precise, and delivered in a tone that carries authority without arrogance. He provides explanations for questions before they are asked, gestures to maps with the ease of familiarity, and waits without impatience. His behavior becomes a subtle guide, directing the officials' attention and shaping their perception of the impossible. And as they question him, a quiet tension settles over the room. The questions are routine at first. Purpose of visit, duration, occupation. Each answer is straightforward, verifiable on the surface, yet layered with unresolvable complexity. He mentions a company, a business meeting, a hotel reservation, all of which, when checked, offer no confirmation. At first, this sparks suspicion, then curiosity, and slowly, a gentle, pervasive wonder begins to seep in. It is in these small moments that stories begin. Each hesitation, each furrowed brow, each repeated glance at a mat becomes a tiny brushstroke. In the painting of legend, the officials' minds oscillate between rational explanation and imaginative conjecture. Could there be a new country, unrecognized by their records? Could there be an error, a secret history they never knew? The human mind, trained to seek coherence, begins filling gaps with narrative, as if the story wants to exist even before it is fully formed. Outside the airport, Tokyo goes about its day, oblivious to the subtle drama unfolding in a small administrative room. The world hums on its usual trajectory. Trains clatter, shopkeepers exchange greetings, children squeal along narrow sidewalks. But inside, perception is being quietly rewritten. A passport, a man, a few sheets of paper. These ordinary objects and gestures temporarily tilt the axis of belief, creating a space where imagination and reality overlap. This is the essence of legend. It is not forged in chaos or spectacle, but in the quiet intersections of attention and anomaly. A small act, a subtle detail, a calm presence, all of these can generate a story that persists long after the initial moment has passed. And this is precisely what the man from Taured achieves. He's not spectacular in appearance, not dramatic in action. Yet his presence creates ripples, extending far beyond the immediate space, shaping memory, curiosity, and the eventual myth. We might pause here to consider the psychology of such a moment. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures, endlessly attuned to coherence. When confronted with something that almost fits, but not quite, the mind lingers. It analyzes, questions, imagines possibilities. In that quiet, subtle pause, the seeds of legend are planted. Each officer, each observer, becomes a participant, whether they intend to or not. The story begins not when the passport is issued, but in the slow, conscious attention it demands. And attention, even quiet, is powerful. It shapes memory, perception, and retelling. By the time the man departs or, in later versions, disappears, the event has already begun to evolve in the minds of those who witnessed it. The city of Tokyo may resume its daily rhythm. Yet within the framework of memory, a pause has occurred. That pause is small, invisible, yet enduring. It is the subtle heartbeat of legend. This moment also teaches us something about human curiosity. It is gentle, patient, and exploratory. Curiosity does not demand certainty. It does not require answers. It thrives in ambiguity, in the slow unfolding of questions that cannot yet be resolved. The officials at Haneda experience this fully. Their initial suspicion gives way to attention. Attention becomes contemplation, and contemplation becomes quiet fascination. The impossible need not shout to be heard. It can simply exist, patiently, and allow the mind to do the work of noticing. Even decades later, as the story of the man from Taured circulates, this moment of quiet attention remains central. It is not the disappearance that captures imagination first, but the way ordinary procedures bend around the extraordinary. It is the subtle transformation of routine into story, the gentle elongation of time when reality seems uncertain, and the soft, pervasive awareness that there may be more to the world than maps, records, or memory can account for. Tokyo's moment of pause is therefore more than a historical detail. It is a meditation on perception, attention, and the delicate mechanics of legend. A man enters, a passport opens, and time stretches slightly as minds engage. Wonder arises, and the boundaries between fact and speculation begin to blur. There is no dramatic explosion, no supernatural display, only the quiet, profound effect of one person, one artifact, and the human mind at work. And so, when you think of Haneda Airport in 1959, imagine the soft hum of activity, the measured voices of officials, and the gentle tilt of reality as a small, unassuming document, crafted with care, challenges assumption, and invites curiosity. It is a story of attention, patience, and the extraordinary power of ordinary objects to reshape perception. In that quiet, elongated moment, the seeds of the man from Taured were planted. And from those seeds, every retelling, every speculation, and every whisper of wonder would eventually grow. Sometimes, all it takes to alter perception is a single pause, a single glance, and a single invitation to wonder. From Tokyo's quiet attention, the story will now drift toward the complexities of human memory, belief, and the evolving interpretations that followed. Chapter 6. The Web of Stories. The story of the man from Taured did not end with a passport or a single day in an airport. In truth, that day was only the first ripple in a slowly spreading web of stories that would span decades, continents, and imaginations. What began as a curious encounter between one man and a few officials gradually became a tapestry of retellings, embellishments, and reinterpretations. And like any carefully woven web, it was both fragile and resilient. Fragile because a single truth might unravel it. Resilient because human fascination would always find a way to sustain it. Consider, for a moment, the first people who told the story, officials who handled the man, clerks who witnessed the uncertainty in the room, journalists who caught the faint murmur of something unusual. At first, these accounts were straightforward. There was the man, there was the passport, there were questions, maps, and a hotel room that held him only briefly. But even in these initial reports, small variations crept in. A detail about his height shifted. His accent changed slightly. The exact spelling of the mysterious nation fluctuated. These were natural human adjustments. Memory is never a perfect recorder of events. But in hindsight, they became the first threads of legend. Then newspapers published articles. Sometimes, they spelled Taured correctly. Other times, it became Taured, or even Taured. Each minor alteration, seemingly insignificant, acted like a seed carried by the wind. Readers, absorbing the story, began to fill in gaps themselves. Perhaps he was a spy. Perhaps he had escaped from a secret war. Perhaps he was a traveler between worlds. Curiosity is contagious, and uncertainty is fertile soil. Once a story touches the imagination of many, it begins to grow independently of its origin. What is remarkable is how naturally this process unfolded. It did not require exaggeration. It did not require intentional fabrication. Human minds are built to notice patterns, to hypothesize, and to reconcile contradictions. So when a man arrives with a passport from a country no one can locate, our brains instinctively seek coherence. We create backstories, motives, explanations often subconsciously. Over time, those private imaginings blend with retellings, creating a shared narrative richer than the original encounter. In the 1960s, the story begins to travel beyond Japan. Journalists in Europe pick up whispers, sometimes misreading dates, sometimes swapping locations. Suddenly, Tokyo is not the only setting. Some versions suggest Geneva, others Paris. The details of the man's attire, his demeanor, even his language skills, expand. 4 languages become 10. 10 become 14. These embellishments are subtle, but they mark the beginning of transformation. The story is no longer strictly about a man at a Japanese airport. It becomes a symbol of the unknown, a template for the curious mind to explore. Books soon followed. Authors who specialized in mysterious or paranormal events seized upon the story. Here, imagination and research intertwine. The authors layered narrative atop fact, crafting scenes in which officials argue heatedly. Maps are slammed on tables, and documents vanish in front of incredulous eyes. They infused the tale with atmosphere, the hum of fluorescent lights, the distant roar of planes, the oppressive weight of bureaucracy. The story becomes cinematic, yet in a quiet, measured way, never fast or frantic, but deliberate and immersive. And the web of stories grows still further in the 1970s and 1980s. Paranormal enthusiasts discover the tale, connecting it to ideas of dimensional travel, time slips, and alternate realities. Suddenly, the man from Taured is no longer merely a clever con artist. He is a traveler between worlds. The narrative stretches, softening the edges of plausibility and emphasizing wonder. It is a transformation guided by human curiosity. Fact bends to fascination, and ambiguity becomes desirable. By the 1990s, the rise of the internet accelerates the spread. Forums, bulletin boards, and early social media platforms become echo chambers for speculation. Reddit threads, paranormal websites, and fan blogs dissect every word, every reported detail, every photograph, some real, some fabricated. Videos are created, animations rendered, voiceovers added. Dramatic music underscores the tale. Even though verification is absent, the story's reach expands. It moves beyond geography and authority, entering the collective imagination with a speed and persistence never seen before. This is the natural life cycle of legend. Every retelling is a negotiation between memory and imagination. Each person contributes a brushstroke to the canvas, even unknowingly. Every embellishment, whether minor or grand, acts like a thread weaving into the larger tapestry. The story becomes alive, almost independent of the original event, sustained by attention, curiosity, and the pleasure humans take in contemplating the impossible. Yet amidst this growth, the story retains a sense of subtlety and calm. It is not the kind of legend that relies on loud spectacles or immediate thrills. Its power lies in the gentle invitation to wonder, the slow unveiling of possibility. When you read or hear the story, you are not startled. You are drawn in. You lean closer, perhaps unconsciously, because it teases your mind, offering the sense that there might be something more beneath the surface of ordinary life. This web of stories also reflects a profound human tendency to seek patterns and meaning in uncertainty. Every time someone recounts the tale, consciously or unconsciously, they impose order on ambiguity. They create causal links, explanations, and motivations. The man's disappearance becomes a puzzle, inviting reasoning, conjecture, and hypothesis. And each attempt to reconcile the story with known facts adds layers, complexity, and richness, all while preserving the essential mystery that fuels fascination. The web also extends across cultures. In Europe, North America, and Asia, the story adapts to local expectations. Names shift. Locations migrate, dates adjust to match other historical events or collective memory. The narrative molds itself to the cultural context, reflecting fears, curiosities, and desires unique to each audience. In Japan, it resonates with post-war awareness of borders and identity. In Western countries, it aligns with the excitement and anxiety of Cold War espionage. Online, it echoes the contemporary unease about information, reality, and authenticity. Despite these variations, one theme persists: the gentle tension between belief and doubt. Every retelling asks, quietly, could this be real? Could someone truly step from one world into another? The story does not demand answers. It does not force conclusions. Instead, it invites reflection, consideration, and, above all, curiosity. And curiosity, as we shun, is the spark from which legends are born and sustained. By now, the man from Taured has become a mirror, reflecting our own desires, fears, and cognitive biases. We are fascinated not only by the man himself, but by the ways in which perception, memory, and narrative interact. How can a story transform? How quickly does imagination expand to fill the gaps left by incomplete information? How subtle, yet persistent, can human curiosity be? These questions are as much the story as the man himself. Even when later investigations uncover the historical basis, John Allen Kucher's egress, the forged passport, the attempts at deception, the web of stories does not vanish. Instead, fact and fiction coexist, layered and intertwined. Reality, in a sense, is no longer the final arbiter. What matters is the narrative experience, the careful unfolding of wonder, curiosity, and the gentle thrill of the unexplained. It is in this delicate interplay that the story finds its enduring strength. Each retelling, whether whispered in a classroom, posted online, or narrated in a video, reinforces the pause, the quiet attention that began decades earlier at Haneda Airport. And with every telling, the legend stretches, grows, and adapts, responding to the minds and imaginations of those who encounter it. Even today, we see the web of stories continue to expand. AI-generated content recreates imagined scenes. Social media amplifies hoaxes, often blending historical fact with modern invention. The Taured passport of 2025, entirely fictional, yet convincing 2000s. demonstrates that the mechanisms which sustain the original story are still in place. Human fascination, attention, and the need for wonder remain as strong as ever. And so, the web continues, not in chaos, but in calm persistence. It is a testament to the enduring power of story, memory, and imagination. The legend of the man from Taured reminds us that reality is only one layer of experience, and that attention, curiosity, and storytelling are equally vital in shaping the world we perceive. The beauty of this web lies not in certainty, but in the gentle invitation it offers. To pause, to notice, to imagine, and to wonder. It asks nothing more than that we engage our minds slowly, thoughtfully, and openly. And if we do, we find that even a story rooted in human deception can transform into something quietly magical, an exploration of perception, memory, and the small mysteries that reside in everyday life. The stories multiply, each retelling a thread, each memory a knot, forming a web that stretches across time and imagination. Chapter 7. The Man Behind the Myth. Behind every legend lies a human face, and the story of the man from Taured is no exception. It is tempting, perhaps comforting, to imagine that a traveler could slip between dimensions, appear with impossible documents, and vanish without a trace. But the deeper, quieter truth is often far more intricate and far more human. To understand why this story endures, why it has woven itself into the collective imagination, we must look closely at the man at its center. Jonathan Kuchar Zigras, the performer, the charmer, the architect of curiosity. Zigras was not a man born in mystery. He was a man who created it. Record suggests he was born around 1924, though even that simple fact wavers under the uncertainty of time. Perhaps in the United States, perhaps elsewhere. His origins, like many elements of his life, resist solid grounding. What is certain is that by the late 1950s, Zigras had cultivated a set of skills that made him simultaneously fascinating and elusive. He spoke multiple languages, he understood bureaucracies, and he had an extraordinary ability to adapt to his surroundings. In short, he was a master navigator of social landscapes, capable of bending perception with subtle gestures, carefully chosen words, and an air of confidence that suggested authority. Imagine him walking through the streets of Tokyo in October 1959, his attire meticulous, his posture assured. Every step is measured, every glance calculated. He is calm, almost imperceptibly commanding. Behind his courteous demeanor, he carries the tools of deception, a passport that is neither entirely authentic nor entirely absurd, a briefcase of documents that appear official, and a performance rehearsed enough to survive brief scrutiny. To the casual observer, he is simply a man of business. To the trained eye, he exudes the aura of someone who knows the unspoken rules of authority and trust, and how to manipulate them. What Zigras understood, perhaps instinctively, is that human perception is both fragile and generous. People want coherence. They want to trust documents, routines, and appearances. He exploited that desire not with violence or confrontation, but with subtlety. He arrived at Haneda Airport equipped not just with forged papers, but with the unshakable belief in his own story. There was no faltering, no hesitation. Every answer he gave reinforced the illusion that he belonged, that his nation Taured was real, and that any doubts lay with the observers, not him. This is the quiet genius of the tale. It does not require grand theatrics. The power lies in the mundane inspection of stamps, the casual flipping of a map, the polite insistence that the world had overlooked something vital. Each interaction is like a carefully placed brushstroke, subtle yet capable of altering perception. It is this attention to the ordinary, magnified by human curiosity, that makes the story feel almost possible, almost true. Zigras's methods were intricate. The passport itself was oversized and handmade, its pages adorned with stamps and symbols that suggested legitimacy while remaining entirely fabricated. Even the inclusion of real geographic references, like Tamanrasset, lent credibility without providing verification. Linguists would later examine the so-called Tauridian language printed within and confirm that it held no meaning, no structure, pure invention. Yet, in the moment, the document worked. It conferred authority, It invited trust, and trust, once granted, is difficult to revoke without conflict. For a man navigating a post-war world rife with fragile borders and meticulous paperwork, such skills were invaluable. Zigguras knew that institutions operated on assumptions, that documents were often trusted more than memory, that officials, constrained by procedure and conditioned by repetition, were vulnerable to the confidence of a carefully rehearsed story. By presenting himself as both credible and composed, he leveraged these human tendencies, transforming a simple airport encounter into a remarkable event. And yet, there was more than strategy at work. Zigguras understood psychology, and not only in the sense of manipulation. He grasped the subtle tension between doubt and belief, curiosity and skepticism. When officials hesitated, he pressed gently, not aggressively, but insistently inviting questions and then answering them with unwavering authority. He recognized that humans are drawn to explanations that feel complete, even if they cannot be fully verified. He tapped into that need, crafting a story that would linger long after he left the room. It is tempting to judge Zigguras harshly for his deception, but his story invites a gentler perspective. In many ways, he was performing a role that the world readily allowed him to play. Bureaucracies were ill-equipped to probe deeply. Communication between nations was slow, and personal verification depended on trust. He filled gaps with imagination and skill, and in doing so, illuminated the vulnerabilities of a system and the human mind itself. The story endures not because of the forgery, but because it exposed the delicate interplay between perception, authority, and narrative. The man behind the myth also illustrates the tension between reality and legend. On one hand, Zigguras was very much human, fallible, creative, ambitious, perhaps even desperate at times. On the other hand, his actions sparked a narrative that would outgrow him, evolving into something almost mythical. By the time paranormal writers, journalists, and online communities engaged with the tale, the human origin, the clever, strategic manipulations of Zigguras had faded behind layers of wonder, speculation, and reinterpretation. What remained was a symbol. The notion that reality might not be as solid as we perceive it, that a single individual could expose cracks in our assumptions, and that curiosity can sustain a story long after its factual basis has eroded. Consider also the aftermath of Zigguras' capture, when authorities discovered the forged traveler's checks and arrested him. The illusion unraveled, yet the aura of mystery persisted. Newspaper coverage, sensationalized in tone, amplified the intrigue. Images of a multilingual fraudster in custody, reports of attempted self-harm, and conflicting claims about his identity added layers of complexity. These moments, factual yet dramatic, contributed as much to legend as the initial airport encounter. The human fascination with complexity, contradiction, and subtle threat transformed ordinary events into enduring narrative threads. Even after his deportation to Hong Kong, Zigguras' trail disappears from public record. No confirmed death, no final interview, no definitive closure. That absence is not a void. It is fertile ground. Human minds, uncomfortable with unresolved endings, instinctively fill gaps with possibility. Was he traveling elsewhere under a new identity? Had he returned to Japan under a different guise? Or had he simply vanished into obscurity, leaving the story for others to carry forward? Each unanswered question fuels imagination. Each uncertainty strengthens legend. In examining Zigguras, we also glimpse the psychology of storytelling itself. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures, drawn to anomalies, and inclined to construct meaning from incomplete information. The man from Taured, at its core, exemplifies this tendency. The factual event, simple in itself, becomes a prism through which perception refracts. The interplay between human credulity and clever deception allows myth to blossom. The story is neither malevolent nor magic-lit, is a mirror reflecting curiosity, attention, and imagination. Moreover, Zigguras' tale demonstrates how stories evolve beyond the control of their originators. Once he left Japan, once the immediate witnesses had recounted their versions, the story began to live independently. Each retelling, slight alteration, and editorial choice carried it further from the human scale of deception into the realm of legend. By the 1980s, the narrative had been transformed by cultural desires. The yearning for unexplained phenomena, the fascination with parallel worlds, and the gentle thrill of the unknown. The man, once the actor, became the symbol. It is in this subtle metamorphosis that the enduring power of the story emerges. Secrecy provides the anchor, a touchstone of plausibility, but it is the human imagination, repeated and shared across time and space, that sustains the legend. Every detail, from the forged passport to the empty hotel room, becomes a node in a network of narrative possibility, and the network expands in ways neither Zegras nor any observer could have predicted, linking decades, continents, and cultural contexts in a slow, deliberate dance of curiosity. Reflecting on this, we see a broader truth. Human beings are co-creators of myth, whether intentionally or not. Each retelling is a collaborative act, an unconscious participation in the ongoing construction of meaning. We embellish, speculate, question, and wonder, and in doing so, we keep stories alive. Legends like the man from Taured endure, not because they are mysterious in themselves, but because they invite us to engage, to imagine, and to explore the boundaries of perception. In the end, Zegras is both the spark and the scaffolding of legend. He is the human seed from which a web of imagination grows, and yet he is also the reminder that myths, no matter how elaborate, are grounded in human reality. The story persists because it resonates with curiosity, because it illuminates human tendencies, and because it balances on the delicate line between the familiar and the extraordinary. And so, when we recount the story of the man from Taured, we are not only recalling an event from an airport in 1959, we are tracing the intricate dance between human ingenuity, perception, and imagination. We are witnessing how a single individual, armed with confidence, cunning, and curiosity, can ignite a story that transcends time, culture, and reason. The man behind the myth, though human and fallible, reminds us of the quiet power embedded in subtle actions, in attention to detail, and in the gentle shaping of perception. He teaches us that sometimes the most enduring mysteries are not the ones that defy physics or logic, but the ones that unfold quietly in the space between fact and imagination. The man at the center of the story fades from sight, yet his influence lingers in every retelling, in every pause, and in every mind curious enough to wonder. And from the intricacies of human deception, the next chapter will gently explore how these stories intersect with our understanding of memory, perception, and the subtle gaps where myth quietly grows. Chapter 8, Memory, Perception, and the Spaces Between. Have you ever noticed how a single moment can feel simultaneously precise and hazy? Perhaps it was a conversation, a glance, a fleeting event that lodges itself in your mind. Later, when you recall it, the edges have softened, details blur, and sometimes your memory adds pieces that never truly existed. That quiet, almost imperceptible reshaping is how stories like the man from Taured find their fertile ground. It's not magic, and it's not trickery, it's the human mind, subtly bending reality in ways we rarely notice. Memory is not a static record, as we might like to imagine. It is fluid, reconstructive, and inherently interpretive. The brain does not store exact copies of experiences. It stores impressions, sensations, fragments of sight, sound, and feeling, then reassembles them each time we recall. In that reconstruction, gaps naturally appear. The mind, eager for coherence, fills them in, sometimes with truth, sometimes with speculation, and sometimes with something entirely new. Imagine an airport scene decades ago, an official flipping through a passport, stamped with the name of a country that shouldn't exist. The observer notes the man's composure, the intricate details of his documents, the confident tone of his speech. Later, when recounting the story, each recollection layers on itself. One official remembers the country slightly differently. Another recalls the man's accent not as it was, but as it felt, perhaps more foreign, perhaps more authoritative. Every retelling reshapes the event, like water flowing over smooth stones, rounding edges, altering surfaces, and sometimes carrying fragments away entirely. This is how the ordinary morphs into legend. Small uncertainties, subtle inconsistencies, and minor embellishments accumulate until the original moment is almost unrecognizable. By the time newspapers report it, by the time storytellers and authors rewrite it, the incident has transformed. And yet, for those who remember the story as truth, it feels precise. There is confidence in detail, even if the detail is imagined. Perception works in similar ways. We perceive the world not as it is, but as filtered through our experiences, expectations, and focus. Two people may witness the same event, yet describe it entirely differently. A color may appear warmer to one, colder to another. A gesture may seem casual or suspicious, depending on the observer's mindset. In the case of the man from Taured, perception played a crucial role. Observers at the airport were not expecting a visitor from a non-existent country, so every signal he sent, the calm tone, the unusual passport, the unknown currency, was colored by that expectation. Small discrepancies became more pronounced. Ordinary behaviors became extraordinary, and ordinary documentation seemed suspiciously crafted. This interplay between memory and perception is where curiosity begins to flourish. Humans are naturally drawn to anomalies, two gaps between expectation and experience. When something cannot be easily explained, the mind lingers. Questions arise. What did I just see? Was that real? Did it really happen that way? Those questions are the fuel of stories. They encouraged reflection, speculation, and ultimately, retelling. Consider the phenomenon psychologists call confabulation, where the brain fills memory gaps with plausible, yet false, details. It is not conscious, lying at ease, yet unintentional weaving of narrative from incomplete threads. In the context of legends, like the man from Taured, confabulation often amplifies the unusual aspects of a story. Officials might exaggerate the stranger's composure, the clarity of his explanations, or the strangeness of the passport. Each added detail increases the story's intrigue, making it feel more coherent while drifting further from reality. And yet, the story persists, not merely because of memory distortions, but because of human desire. Humans crave coherence, mystery, and wonder simultaneously. The man from Taured provides a bridge between the everyday and the extraordinary. It allows minds to explore the impossible, while remaining anchored to the familiar structure of an airport, of immigration procedures, of a seemingly ordinary man carrying a passport. This delicate balance between reality and imagination is what gives the story its hypnotic power. Rhetorical questions often rise quietly in these moments. How often do we question the reality presented to us? How many times have we accepted something at face value simply because it was confidently presented? And how many stories might exist quietly between the folds of memory, perception, and repetition? These are the spaces where myth quietly grows. They are small, almost invisible, yet expansive enough to sustain curiosity across generations. In exploring these ideas, it is impossible not to notice the parallels between the man from Taured and other enduring anomalies. Consider the Mandela effect, where thousands recall historical details differently. A line from a movie, a logo on a cereal box, a famous death that supposedly occurred years before it did. These recollections are often confidently held, shared across communities, and stubbornly persistent. Like Taured, they highlight the fragile, reconstructive nature of memory. They remind us that truth and belief are not always aligned, and that stories can take on lives independent of fact. Time-slip narratives also dwell in these liminal spaces. Pilots who claim to have flown over airfields that did not yet exist. Tourists wandering streets decades out of alignment. Soldiers witnessing events before they occur. These tales echo the tension between perception, memory, and imagination. In each, the human mind confronts the inexplicable, and, in doing so, contributes to a collective narrative that grows beyond the original incident. The man from Taured fits neatly within this pattern. A story that begins with human observation and expands through retelling, interpretation, and subtle embellishment. Even contemporary hoaxes, like the Taured passport incident in 2025, operate in these same cognitive spaces. Digital media accelerates the spread, but the underlying mechanism remains the same. The mind notices anomalies, constructs meaning, and shares the story. The combination of uncertainty and plausibility, the possibility that maybe it could happen, creates fertile ground. Memory and perception, along with repetition and storytelling, transform ordinary events into legend, and legend into cultural touchstone. Yet, in this gentle exploration, it is important to remember that these processes are not failures. Memory, perception, and imagination are what make us human. They allow us to navigate complexity, to anticipate danger, to explore possibilities, and to wonder. Legends, like the man from Taured, are not signs of weakness or gullibility. They are signs of a mind at work, probing, questioning, and imagining. They invite us to engage with the unknown, without demanding immediate answers, to linger in the spaces between certainty and curiosity. It is also worth noting that our fascination with such stories speaks to a broader psychological truth. Humans are pattern seekers. We are attuned to anomalies and drawn to stories that challenge ordinary assumptions. The man from Taured exemplifies this instinct. The combination of familiarity, a man, a passport, an airport with the subtle twists of the impossible, a country that does not exist triggers a narrative reflex. Minds begin to fill gaps, to speculate, to construct meaning. The story grows organically, one mind at a time, until it transcends its origin and becomes a shared cultural phenomenon. The interplay between human cognition and story evolution is delicate and mesmerizing. Each retelling, each addition of detail, and each reinterpretation contributes to the legend. The story of the man from Taured, once grounded in a carefully constructed deception by a single individual, has evolved into a rich tapestry of imagination and inquiry. The lines between reality and perception blur. Yet, in that blur, there is clarity of another kind. Clarity about how humans engage with mystery, uncertainty, and curiosity. And so, the tale continues not because of supernatural intervention, not because of interdimensional travel, but because the mind is endlessly inventive. Each reader, each listener, each witness contributes to the ongoing construction of the narrative, consciously or not. In that sense, the legend lives, quietly, in the shared spaces between memory, perception, and imagination. Stories like this remind us of the quiet power inherent in observation, reflection, and curiosity. They teach us to attend to details, to question assumptions, and to embrace wonder without demanding immediate answers. And in that gentle, hypnotic way, they cultivate the habit of listening, of noticing, and of thinking, not only about what is, but about what could be, and how the mind itself shapes our experience of the world. As we consider the story of the man from Taured, it becomes clear that the legend is not merely about a mysterious man or a passport from a country that never existed. It is about the human mind and the subtle, almost imperceptible processes that shape our understanding of reality. The legend persists because humans, collectively, continue to notice anomalies, reflect upon them, and pass them along. Memory, perception, and imagination work together, quietly and persistently, to keep the story alive. And perhaps the most profound lesson is this: the spaces between certainty and curiosity, the quiet gaps in memory and perception, are not voids. They are the very spaces where imagination thrives, where stories endure, and where the human mind discovers its capacity for wonder. From the delicate interplay of memory and perception, the next chapter will gently explore how culture, media, and shared fascination transform singular events into enduring legends. Chapter 9. The Alchemy of Culture and Storytelling. Stories, like seeds, need fertile ground to grow, and in the case of the man from Taured, that ground was not only the imagination of individuals, but the shared culture in which those imaginations took root. Culture, in this sense, is not merely the sum of traditions, media, or collective behaviors. It is the lens through which events are interpreted, filtered, and amplified. It determines which details are noticed, which anomalies are elevated, and which narratives are quietly forgotten. In post-war Japan, for example, a society was emerging from the shadows of conflict, rebuilding itself, and negotiating its place in a rapidly globalizing world. Borders were not merely lines on a map. They were symbols of security, sovereignty, and identity. In such a context, a man presenting a passport from a country that did not exist would resonate far more strongly than it might in a calmer, more stable setting. Officials were trained to notice deviations from expected procedures, yet even they could not have anticipated a deviation of this kind. And when ordinary procedures failed to account for the anomaly, the story began to ripple outward. each retelling imbued with the emotional and cultural undertones of the time. Media played a subtle but powerful role in this process. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, and magazines had the authority to shape perception. When a reporter wrote about the mystery man, the description might emphasize his calm demeanor, his unusual documents, or the bewilderment of officials. Even small embellishments, perhaps a note about a foreign accent, or the intricate design of his passport, made the story more compelling. Over time, as newspapers circulated, details were repeated, slightly altered, or dramatized to captivate readers. The story, once bound to a specific event, began to exist independently, shaped by the cultural expectations of its audience. This is how culture acts as both lens and amplifier. It selects which elements of an experience are remembered and which are dismissed. It determines whether a story becomes folklore or fades into obscurity. The man from Taured endured because the narrative aligned with broader anxieties and fascinations, the fragility of borders, the uncertainty of identity, the allure of the unexplained. In different contexts, other stories occupy similar spaces. The Loch Ness Monster in Scotland, the disappearing villages of time-slip folklore, even modern urban legends circulating on social media. Each of these narratives thrives because culture offers it a home. Consider the subtle variations in the Taured story across decades and regions. Early versions emphasized the stranger's composure and confidence. Later iterations focused on the impossibility of the country itself, while contemporary retellings highlight technological elements, AI-generated passports, viral videos, or online debates. Each adaptation reflects the preoccupations and curiosities of its era. The story evolves, not because its essence changes, but because culture provides the vocabulary and imagery to express it. It is also important to recognize the role of collective fascination. When individuals share a story, they do more than recount facts. They join in a shared act of meaning-making. Each listener or reader brings their own assumptions, biases, and expectations. In doing so, they subtly influence how the story is understood and remembered. Over time, this cumulative effect transforms a single incident into a living narrative, constantly reshaped by those who carry it forward. This process of cultural alchemy is particularly evident in modern digital storytelling. Online platforms allow a single account to reach thousands, or even millions, almost instantly. Every comment, every interpretation, every reimagined version becomes part of the story's ecosystem. A reader's curiosity triggers another's imagination, which triggers yet another retelling. Within days, the legend grows far beyond the confines of any original event. In such a network, truth becomes one thread among many, and narrative coherence is maintained not through verification, but through the resonance of the story itself. In reflecting on this, we notice a delicate balance between specificity and universality. The Man from Taured is a story grounded in particular details. A mid-century airport, a passport with the name of a fictional country, a man speaking multiple languages with confidence. Yet these details are also universal, enough to evoke fascination across time and culture. The specifics anchor the story in reality, while the universality allows listeners to project themselves into the scenario, to wonder, to imagine the impossible. The story also benefits from ambiguity. When a narrative leaves gaps, those gaps invite engagement. How did the man vanish? Was the passport real? Could a country truly exist without leaving any trace? Questions like these are not inconveniences. They are engines of curiosity. They encourage the mind to wander, to construct possibilities, and to return repeatedly to the story for answers that may never fully arrive. This quiet tension, the space between what is known and what is imagined, is where legends thrive. Psychologically, this process aligns with the principle of narrative coherence. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures, wired to detect connections and meaning, even where none objectively exists. When confronted with anomalies, our minds instinctively attempt to integrate them into familiar frameworks. The Man from Taured fits perfectly into this pattern. Observers notice irregularities, cast on them, and fill the gaps with explanations that make sense within their worldview. Each retelling, each adaptation, each slight embellishment strengthens the perceived coherence of the narrative, creating a self-sustaining cycle of engagement. There is also a social dimension to consider. Stories like Taured serve as communal touchstones. They provide a shared reference point for discussions about uncertainty, authority, and possibility. When individuals recount the tale, they implicitly invite others into a collective exploration of mystery. This shared curiosity creates a subtle bond, a quiet form of connection, even when the story itself remains unresolved. The legend functions as a mirror, reflecting both the mind that imagines it and the culture that sustains it. And so, the story continues to live quietly across generations. It evolves as culture evolves, always reflecting the anxieties, hopes, and curiosities of those who carry it. Even as fact-checkers examine the details, even as historians trace the story back to John Allen, Kucher's Egris, and his elaborate deception, the narrative persists. It has transcended its origin, becoming more than an incident in a 1959 airport. It has become a meditation on human perception, a reflection of cultural fascination, and an illustration of the enduring power of storytelling itself. In this alchemy of culture, the legend demonstrates the subtle interplay between individual cognition and collective imagination. Memory and perception set the stage. Culture and shared fascination amplify the tale. Ambiguity and resonance sustain it. Together, these forces transform a single curious event into a legend capable of captivating minds for decades, perhaps centuries, and perhaps most importantly, this story reminds us that humans do not simply consume narratives, they participate in them. Each retelling, each act of attention, each spark of wonder adds a brushstroke to a larger canvas. In this way, legends are not static. They are living, breathing entities, shaped as much by those who witness them as by those who first lived them. The man from Taured survives because humans are curious, attentive, and imaginative. The story thrives because culture provides context and resonance. And the legend endures because it offers a space where reality and imagination meet, where certainty and uncertainty dance together, and where the mind can wander freely, exploring what could be rather than what must be. Chapter 10. Patterns of Belief and the Mind's Quiet Magic. It is remarkable how the mind clings to stories. Not all stories, of course, only those that leave space for wonder, that brush lightly against the edges of the known and the unknown. The Man from Taured is one such story, but it is also part of a far larger pattern, a rhythm of belief that has pulsed through human consciousness for centuries. To understand it fully, we must step away from passports, airports, and vanished men, and instead look inward, into the quiet architecture of thought itself. Humans are natural pattern seekers. From the first flicker of firelight to the glowing screens of today, we have scanned the world for meaning. A branch shaped like an animal, clouds forming familiar shapes, the way footsteps echo in an empty hallway. These are not coincidences to us. They are invitations. They are the mind whispering, "Notice me, connect me, tell a story." And once a story forms, it becomes more than a collection of facts. It becomes a vessel for imagination, a framework through which the world is interpreted. In this context, legends like the Man from Taured occupy a special place. They are not merely entertaining tales. They are exegeses in mental alchemy. Each new version, each subtle change, is a reflection of the mind's attempt to reconcile anomaly with expectation. When people hear of a man with a passport from a country that does not exist, they do not simply shrug and forget. Something stirs, a combination of disbelief and fascination, fear and curiosity. The mind begins to construct possibilities. Could such a place exist? Was the man a trickster, a time traveler, or merely an extraordinary con artist? These questions resonate because humans are inherently comfortable with ambiguity. When it is framed as a story, in daily life we crave clarity, names, dates, outcomes, but in the liminal spaces between certainty and mystery, the mind experiences delight. It is a gentle tension, a quiet pulse of engagement that encourages reflection and imagination without alarm. This is the quiet magic of stories. They invite contemplation, they cultivate curiosity, they allow the mind to wander without risk. Belief, however, is a curious companion. It does not always require evidence. Often it requires only resonance. When a story aligns with personal experiences, cultural context, or innate curiosity, it is granted a subtle authority. This is why the legend of the man from Taured has endured. It mirrors anxieties and curiosities present across generations. Borders, identity, the reliability of documents, and the boundaries of reality itself, these themes are universally compelling. Even when evidence contradicts the tale, the story retains its power because it speaks to something deeper than proof. Folklore throughout history demonstrates the same principle. Consider the wandering spirits of European villages, the desert travelers of Middle Eastern tales, or the time-displaced stories of indigenous cultures. In each case, narratives persist because they answer unspoken questions. What lies beyond what we see? Can the impossible be possible? Are there moments where the fabric of reality shifts ever so slightly, just enough to let wonder slip through? The man from Taured is the modern echo of these ancient curiosities. It is not merely a story of an impossible passport, but a mirror reflecting the mind's desire to perceive the unseen, to imagine beyond the habitual, to explore the edges of known existence. The mechanisms of belief are subtle. They operate quietly, without fanfare. A single retelling, a shared anecdote, or even a fleeting image can nudge perception. Social reinforcement amplifies this effect. When multiple people recount a tale, their consensus subtly validates the narrative. Over time, details become standardized, small variations accepted as part of the myth. Memory, malleable as it is, begins to treat repeated versions as personal experience. What was once imagination can feel like knowledge. This is particularly evident in the digital age. Online, stories accelerate, mutate, and resonate with unprecedented speed. A single post about a mysterious traveler can gather thousands of views, inspiring comments, theories, and reinterpretations. Each participant contributes a layer, a nuance, a small embellishment. The original incident, if there ever was one, becomes less important than the shared experience of pondering the story. In this way, modern technology mirrors the timeless processes of folklore. People collectively nurture, expand, and immortalize the narrative. Yet belief is not only cultural, it is deeply personal. Each listener or reader carries their own mental landscape, memories, dreams, experiences, and biases. When encountering a story like Taured, the mind instinctively tests it against known frameworks, trying to reconcile anomalies with expectations. Some individuals experience a gentle thrill of cognitive dissonance. The world almost fits, yet there is a subtle misalignment. Others may experience fascination tinged with skepticism, savoring the ambiguity without needing resolution. In all cases, the mind is engaged, not merely entertained. This quiet engagement is the essence of the bedtime story experience. Unlike thrillers or horror, where the pulse races and adrenaline spikes, a tale like The Man from Taured invites calm curiosity. It stretches imagination gently, coaxing the listener to lean closer to the edge of possibility while remaining safe in the warmth of narrative structure. It is the mind's version of a soft lamp in a dark room, illuminating shadows without startling them. We also see this principle reflected in our attraction to anomalies more broadly. Unexplained phenomena, misfits in the natural order, and fleeting glimpses of the unknown all capture attention because they create narrative space. They leave questions unresolved, and unresolved questions invite engagement. A legend need not resolve its mysteries to persist. In fact, it thrives precisely because some gaps remain. The human mind, endlessly curious, fills those gaps with wonder, speculation, and meaning. Consider the emotional texture of this engagement. Curiosity often carries a gentle tension, a slight unease, a soft anticipation, a sense that there is more to perceive. Unlike fear, which triggers fight or flight, this tension fosters reflection, observation, and subtle delight. The Man from Taured provides this kind of tension. Each retelling offers new details, new angles, yet always preserves an essential ambiguity. Listeners can imagine themselves stepping into the scene, seeing the strange passport, witnessing the calm composure of the traveler, feeling the gentle confusion of officials. And in that imagining, curiosity blooms. The story also teaches patience. It does not rush to reveal truths, nor does it demand immediate understanding. Instead, it stretches across time and memory, allowing reflection to deepen. Like a river slowly shaping stone, It carves subtle impressions on the mind. The narrative grows richer with repeated engagement, inviting not only attention but contemplation. Through these, the listener becomes part of the story's living process, participating in a cycle of observation, reflection, and wonder. This participation extends beyond the story itself. Observing the man from Taured encourages reflection on perception, memory, and the nature of reality. It gently prompts the listener to consider, how do I know what I know? How reliable are the documents, the maps, the authorities I trust? What is imagination, and what is observation? In asking these questions, the story becomes both mirror and guide, showing the contours of human cognition even as it enchants with its narrative charm. In the end, the legend thrives because it intertwines the personal and the cultural, the imagined and the remembered, the mysterious and the familiar. It is neither fully fact nor fully fiction. It is something more subtle, more persistent. It occupies the spaces between certainty and ambiguity, offering a gentle journey into curiosity itself. Each retelling becomes a quiet invitation. Notice the unexplained, savor the moment, and allow the mind to wander. And so, the man from Taured, while rooted in an actual historical event, becomes timeless. He exists not just in airport corridors of the past, but in the minds of those who encounter the story today. He persists because the human mind craves this kind of wonder, this subtle tension, this space for imagination. In a world often bound by logic, he is a whisper of possibility, a reminder that the act of questioning is as important as the answer itself. Every story leaves its trace. Some vanish quickly, forgotten as soon as they are told. Others linger, settling into memory like a soft echo. The man from Taured belongs to the latter category. Each new generation, each new mind that listens, adds a brushstroke to the tapestry of the legend. And as the story unfolds in minds around the world, it quietly teaches us about the beauty of curiosity, the fragility of certainty, and the gentle magic of imagination. And as the mind wanders further, we begin to see that this story is not an isolated phenomena, is part of a grander tapestry of belief, folklore, and wonder that stretches across time and space. Chapter 11. The Digital Age and the Echo of Legends. As the world moved forward into the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the man from Taured found himself living a new life, no longer confined to the printed pages of newspapers, or whispered through office corridors and library corners. He entered a space unlike anything the post-war world had offered. The digital realm, the quiet, slow-spreading story of a mysterious traveler, now had the potential to reach millions in moments. Each retelling amplified by unseen algorithms, each embellished by anonymous voices, each reshaped by imagination. The digital age changed more than distribution. It changed perception. Before the internet, stories grew gradually, each iteration the result of word of mouth or slow print cycles. A single error could remain contained. A misremembered year or a misnamed location might survive only in local legend. Now, however, a small inaccuracy could spread like wildfire. The story of Taured became a living example of this new phenomenon. It evolved faster than the original could ever have anticipated, absorbing new ideas, merging with other myths, and entwining itself with contemporary anxieties. Consider the viral nature of such narratives. A single post, shared widely, could spark debates in forums, threads on Reddit, YouTube recreations with cinematic flair, and discussions across social media platforms. Each participant became a silent storyteller, adding their interpretations, expressing doubt, or creating visualizations that fed collective imagination. A simple tale of a man with a passport, from an unknown nation transformed into an interactive experience, shared thought experiment, spanning continents and time zones. And yet, the story remained calm, hypnotic, and quietly intriguing. Unlike sensationalized headlines or abrupt horror clips, The Man from Taured moved at its own pace. Readers lingered over details, the appearance of the passport, the foreign coins, the perfectly ordinary yet impossible demeanor of the traveler. The narrative encouraged reflection rather than shock. In a digital world dominated by speed and overload, it offered a space for thoughtfulness, a rare pause to notice, to imagine, to wonder. In this era, parallels began to appear. People began sharing experiences that echoed the original mystery. Tales of passports from fictional countries, mysterious visas, and unexplained travel anomalies appeared online. Each new story carried a familiar rhythm: calm presentation, slight tension, hintily intrigue, a resolution that left questions open. Some were hoaxes, deliberately fabricated to test belief. Others were accidental, the product of confusion, poor documentation, or imaginative reconstruction. Yet every instance fed the same human curiosity that had nurtured the Taured story for decades. One such example arrived quietly in 2025. A woman allegedly appeared at JFK Airport with a passport from Taured, a nation that did not exist. Videos circulated online, showing her calm demeanor, her documents examined, officials perplexed. The footage was cinematic, composed, and hypnotic, evoking the same gentle tension of the original Taured account. The story went viral. People speculated. Had a portal opened between worlds? Was this a prank? Was it a digitally fabricated story? In truth, it was later revealed to be a hoax, generated with AI tools. Yet the impact remained. Tens of thousands had engaged with the narrative, and the subtle thrill persisted. This moment illustrated an important truth. Legends do not need reality to survive. They only need resonance. The story need not be true, it need only echo patterns already familiar in the human mind. The internet, by providing global connectivity, magnified this effect. Myths became interactive, evolving faster than ever before, and sometimes indistinguishable from fact in the minds of casual observers. The line between truth and imagination blurred, yet the calm, hypnotic allure remained. People were drawn less by proof and more by participation, less by certainty and more by curiosity. At the same time, this digital environment highlighted the mechanics of belief. When encountering such stories online, individuals often engage in a quiet negotiation. How much do I accept? What seems plausible? Could this exist? They investigate sources, read comments, consider alternative explanations. In other words, the story becomes a conversation, a mental game, a shared exploration of the boundaries between reality and imagination. Unlike traditional urban legends, which spread slowly and privately, these digital narratives allow for immediate communal reflection. The psychological texture of this process is gentle yet profound. When a story is repeated in multiple context forums, videos, articles, the mind treats it with subtle authority. Repetition, coupled with plausibility, nurtures belief, even if the story contradicts known facts. This is not gullibility, but a reflection of how humans process complex information. We rely on patterns, context, and social consensus to form judgments. The Man from Taured, in its digital reincarnation, demonstrates this beautifully. Each new post, each retelling, strengthens the collective narrative. The legend grows not because it is true, but because it resonates. Moreover, the digital age fosters imaginative collaboration. People create illustrations, reenactments, and simulations of the Man from Taured scenario. Some design detailed maps showing Taured in the Pyrenees, complete with trade routes, government offices, and fictional landmarks. Others compose ambient soundtracks to accompany the story, adding auditory depth to the calm, mysterious atmosphere. Fans of the legend experiment with cinematic techniques, soft narration, and careful pacing, ensuring that the story retains its hypnotic quality. Each contribution reinforces the sense of shared experience and the gentle thrill of pondering the impossible. Interestingly, these modern retellings often include reflective elements reminiscent of the original story's contemplative tone. Viewers and readers are invited to consider questions. How do we know reality is stable? Could an anomaly ever exist? What does it feel like to encounter something entirely outside expectation, yet remain calm? In these moments, the narrative ceases to be a simple tale. It becomes an exercise in mindfulness, observation, and reflection, allowing the listener to inhabit a space between curiosity and comprehension. The digital medium also preserves subtle ambiguity. Unlike print, where eras are fixed in ink, or television where footage exists as a single recorded moment, online stories can be continually modified. A small adjustment, a new date, a different accent, an additional language, can travel widely without disrupting the overall rhythm. This fluidity ensures that the story remains alive, responsive, and adaptable, reflecting both the mutable nature of memory and the evolving dynamics of global culture. Through this lens, The Man from Taured is not simply a historical curiosity or an anecdotal mystery. It is a demonstration of how stories evolve, how they interact with technology, and how humans, collectively, negotiate belief. The narrative shows that myths are not static. They are living processes, shaped by repetition, resonance, and human imagination. Each person who engages with the story contributes to its growth, consciously or unconsciously, reinforcing its calm, mysterious power. And yet, even amid this transformation, the essence of the tale remains remarkably consistent. The traveler, the impossible passport, the gentle tension of disbelief, and the quiet resolution that leaves questions open all endure. The story moves more swiftly in the digital age, but the hypnotic rhythm persists. People linger on details, wonder about possibilities, and reflect on the subtle instability of perception. It is as if the narrative itself has learned to breathe with a mind, slow and measured, inviting observation rather than demanding action. In a broader sense, the digital evolution of legends like Taured mirrors the way human understanding adapts to new environments. As tools, technologies, and social structures change, stories do not vanish. They translate, transforming to maintain relevance. They absorb new anxieties, incorporate contemporary symbols, and reflect evolving cultural norms. In doing so, they continue to nurture curiosity, provoke gentle tension, and invite reflection. Timeless qualities that connect ancient folklore to modern experiences. And perhaps this is the most enduring lesson of The Man from Taured in the digital age. Stories, carefully nurtured and quietly shared, can survive and thrive even when reality itself offers little support. They exist in the spaces between fact and imagination, between past and present, between the certainty of documents and the subtle thrill of possibility. They teach patience, attentiveness, and openness to wonder, reminding us that the mind's engagement is just as important as external truth. Through online forums, video essays, speculative discussions, and artistic recreations, the legend lives on. Each new person who encounters the story becomes part of its ongoing narrative, participating in the quiet magic of shared imagination. In this scene, The Man from Taured has transcended its origins. It is no longer merely a tale of a vanished man. It is a gentle exploration of belief, perception, and the enduring human desire to encounter the unknown. In the stillness of late nights, when the mind is free to wander and the world is hushed, these stories find their most receptive audience. The gentle rhythm of narrative, the soft suspense, the invitation to question without fear, all combine to create an atmosphere where curiosity can flourish. In that quiet space, The Man from Taured is not a historical oddity, nor a sensational hoax. He is a companion to thought, a guide to the edges of imagination, and a mirror reflecting the patterns of the mind. And so, in the hum of servers, the flicker of screens, and the quiet scroll of feeds, the story persists, waiting patiently for the next mind to encounter it, to pause, to wonder, and to listen. Chapter 12. Reflections on Reality and Belief. There is something quietly profound about the way humans engage with stories. Perhaps it is the gentle pull of curiosity, the soft tug that invites us to linger, just a little longer in a world that is not entirely our own. The tale of The Man from Taured is not extraordinary because it defies the laws of physics or because it presents a tangible mystery that can be solved with measurements and maps. It is extraordinary because it speaks to a part of the mind that craves wonder, that notices subtle anomalies, that enjoys pausing to contemplate what might lie just beyond the edges of the familiar. Consider, for a moment, the subtle moments in everyday life when our own reality seems uncertain. You are walking down a street you have known for years, and suddenly a building appears that you don't remember being there, or a shop has vanished. Perhaps a familiar voice or a face seems slightly displaced, leaving you to question whether memory has betrayed you or time itself has shifted, slowly but surely. These fleeting instants, often ignored or rationalized, are the same spaces in which legends like the man from Taured thrive. They resonate because they touch something universal. The quiet awareness that the world is not entirely predictable, that perception is layered, and that even what seems concrete may contain subtle fractures. The story invites reflection. It does not demand panic or disbelief, only attention. When the man with the impossible passport stepped through Tokyo's immigration gates, he did not shout or threaten, nor did he perform impossible feats of magic. He existed simply, calmly, confidently, in a world that momentarily failed to recognize him. That subtle misalignment, the ordinary world encountering. The impossible creates a tension that is both gentle and profound. It is the same tension we feel when a familiar song triggers an unexpected memory, or when a fleeting shadow suggests a presence beyond what we can explain. And there is a lesson in the way the tale evolves. The narrative of Taured reminds us that belief is not simply a function of truth, but a response to coherence, repetition, and emotional resonance. Even when every document is traced, every fact verified, and every illusion revealed, the story persists in human consciousness. It is not because people refuse reason, but because stories provide a framework for contemplating uncertainty. They offer a gentle, hypnotic space in which the imagination can move freely, testing possibilities, exploring what-if scenarios, and engaging with ambiguity in a way that reality rarely permits. Across centuries, cultures, and modes of storytelling, legends like this have adapted in subtle ways. Folk tales, urban legends, and modern myths all share a quiet mechanism. They anchor curiosity in the familiar, then extend it into the extraordinary. The man from Taured does exactly this. He begins as a seemingly ordinary traveler, a man who could have walked among countless others, yet his existence gently contradicts expectation. Each retelling, each adaptation expands the story just enough to allow the mind to wander further without shattering the calm rhythm of the narrative. This is part of the hypnotic quality of the legend. It is neither frantic nor rushed. It moves at a pace that permits reflection. The narrative unfolds slowly, step by step, allowing the audience to inhabit the same careful, attentive space that the immigration officers once did. Watching, verifying, questioning, and eventually experiencing a gentle, pervasive doubt. The suspense is not about immediate danger, but about subtle misalignment at tension between perception and expectation, between memory and observation. One might even consider the story as a mirror, reflecting aspects of ourselves that we do not always acknowledge. How often do we accept assumptions without question? How frequently do we overlook minor anomalies because they do not fit the narrative we have constructed? The man from Taured, in his calm insistence, challenges these tendencies without aggression or spectacle. He demonstrates that disruption can be quiet, that astonishment need not be loud, and that wonder is not measured by the scale of an event, but by the subtle shift it creates in perception. In reflecting upon the story, it becomes clear that legends are not only about the events they recount, but also about the human responses they evoke. Consider the officers in Tokyo. Diligent, methodical, cautious, they follow procedure, verify records, and assess reality based on the evidence before them. Yet even they encounter a scenario that momentarily suspends conventional judgment, highlighting a core truth about human cognition. No system, no matter how thorough, can entirely eliminate surprise, uncertainty, or the unexpected. It is in these moments that stories take root, quietly embedding themselves in consciousness, waiting for each new observer to re-experience the gentle tension of the anomaly. And the digital age has only amplified this mechanism. Today, a single image, post, or video can circulate to millions within hours. The hypnotic rhythm of Taured translates seamlessly to online spaces, where each comment, each shared retelling, becomes part of the legend's living tapestry. People respond with fascination, skepticism, imagination, and curiosities, sometimes all at once. The narrative invites reflection without demanding action. It persists because the story engages the mind in ways that simple information cannot. What is particularly striking is how these legends cultivate empathy as well as curiosity. The man from Taured is not framed as threatening or alien in a menacing sense. He is simply out of place, calm, composed, and confident, facing a world that cannot reconcile his existence. In that tension, listeners or readers are prompted to imagine themselves in his position. How would it feel to encounter a world that refuses to recognize something fundamental about your identity? To be patient, precise, and rational, while those around you grow increasingly puzzled. This subtle emotional resonance reinforces the story's lasting impact, nurturing reflection alongside wonder. In this way, The Man from Taured functions both as a legend and as a gentle meditation on perception, memory, and belief. It is a story that encourages slowing down, observing carefully, and questioning gently. It demonstrates that reality, while structured and measurable, is experienced subjectively, filtered through attention, expectation, and imagination. The story does not insist on proving impossible travel or parallel universes. It simply illustrates the richness and depth of human response to the unexpected. Perhaps this is why the legend persists, quietly, century after century. Not because it is extraordinary in spectacle, but because it is extraordinary in subtlety. It lingers in the mind like the last note of a lullaby, a soft echo that invites contemplation. Each retelling adds nuance, gently reshapes emphasis, and introduces small variations, yet the story retains its hypnotic core. A traveler who cannot be reconciled with maps or history, yet who exists calmly, gently, as an invitation to wonder. By now, one can see the threads connecting history, psychology, and culture. Legends like The Man from Taured are not accidents. They are reflections of human curiosity, tools for exploring uncertainty, and reminders that even in an ordered, procedural world, anomalies can exist. They show that wonder does not require chaos or danger, only perception, attention, and imagination. And in that space, between belief and doubt, between the seen and the imagined, lies a quiet, enduring magic. Even in modern classrooms, forums, and research discussions, the story serves as a case study in narrative, perception, and human psychology. Scholars examine it. For insight into cognitive patterns, sociologists reference it. When discussing myth formation, and enthusiasts explore it for its calm, hypnotic intrigue. Each engagement reinforces the original principle. Stories survive, not solely because they are true, but because they resonate with the patterns and rhythms of human thought. And so, as we sit quietly and consider The Man from Taured, we realize that the story is more than an anecdote, more than a historical footnote, and more than a viral phenomenon. It is a meditation on the subtle interplay between curiosity and belief, perception and expectation, fact and imagination. In its calm, deliberate pacing, it offers an invitation to notice anomalies, to consider possibility, and to explore the spaces between certainty and wonder. It teaches patience, attention, and imagination. It demonstrates that even the smallest anomaly can ignite curiosity and reflection. And it reminds us, gently, that the world is often richer and more layered than it seems, if only we take the time to observe, question, and imagine. And in the quiet of late evenings, when the world slows and the mind begins to wander, the story lingers a soft companion, a subtle invitation to wonder, a gentle whisper of the mysteries that might exist just beyond what we see. Chapter 13. The Legacy of the Man from Taured. Time has a quiet way of softening events, of layering them with memory, speculation, and imagination, until they no longer resemble the original occurrence, but instead become something else entirely: a story, a reflection, a meditation. The tale of The Man from Taured has traveled this path, from an incident at Tokyo's Haneda Airport in the late 1950s to its modern manifestations across forums, YouTube videos, and online communities. The story has taken on a life of its own, gently expanding, folding in new details, and inviting each observer to step into a world slightly askew from their own. Even now, decades later, there are those who feel The pulse of that legend has a quiet, hypnotic rhythm beneath the surface of everyday life. They think of the meticulous way the man presented himself, the calm assurance with which he offered a country that did not exist, and the strange combination of patience and frustration that marked his encounters with authority. That image is enduring, not because it is sensational, but because it is human. It reflects a deep, enduring curiosity, the urge to explore, to question, to wonder. Legends do more than entertain. They instruct, they mirror, and they remind us of the fragile balance between certainty and doubt. The man from Taured is a masterclass in subtle disruption. He did not storm through the airport waving arms or demand recognition with fury. He existed quietly, confidently, and in doing so, forced the world around him to pause. And in that pause, imagination was allowed to bloom. It is in this gentle unfolding that the story finds its hypnotic power, slow, deliberate, and full of lingering questions. As the years passed, writers and storytellers added layers. Some emphasized the mystery of his disappearance. Others explored the idea of parallel universes, still more focused on the human drama. A man stranded in a world that refuses to recognize him. Each retelling was like a brushstroke, painting over the original incident with the colors of curiosity, wonder, and subtle fear. But through all these iterations, one constant remained. The story asks us to consider the unexpected without rushing us, to notice anomalies without panicking, and to engage the mind in quiet reflection. Modern technology has only amplified the story's reach. In the age of digital media, a single image or a compelling narrative can travel across the globe instantly. The man from Taured thrives here, not because the facts matter, but because the story evokes a gentle, persistent tension, the sense that reality may hold small, hidden surprises. These are the moments that make the story enduring, the ones that invite each listener, each reader, to imagine themselves stepping into the shoes of the man who carried a passport to a nation unseen by maps or memory. And there is a lesson in this enduring fascination. It is not a lesson in disbelief or cynicism. It is a lesson in mindfulness. The story encourages us to slow down, to observe carefully, and to question gently. It reminds us that the world is full of subtle anomalies, that even the most ordered and routine environments can yield moments of wonder, and that curiosity, when paired with careful attention, is one of the most human and transformative qualities we possess. Think of the small anomalies you encounter in your daily life. A familiar street that seems slightly different, a memory that refuses to align perfectly with reality, a stranger who seems to know more than they should. These are not threats. They are invitations. The man from Taured, in his calm and composed presence, exemplifies this invitation. He teaches patience, observation, and quiet curiosity. He shows that wonder does not demand spectacle. It is often found in the subtle, the ordinary, and the gently impossible. This story also reminds us that reality is experienced individually. What seems certain to one person may appear fluid to another. Maps and documents, facts and procedures. These are tools that guide us, but they do not capture the totality of experience. In encountering someone like the man from Taured, the ordinary frameworks of understanding falter, and we are invited to engage with a world slightly richer, slightly stranger than the one we thought we knew. That gentle dissonance is the core of the legend's lasting appeal. Even the evolution of the story over time is instructive. From newspaper reports in the 1960s to contemporary online forums, each retelling reshapes details, shifts emphasis, and introduces new perspectives. Yet the central essence remains: a calm, composed figure who presents a world unrecognized by those around him. The story survives because it resonates with fundamental human experiences. The tension between certainty and doubt, the attraction of the unknown, and the quiet thrill of exploring the edges of possibility. The man from Taured also invites reflection on how myths are formed. Historical events, when observed through the lens of human imagination, slowly transform. Facts mingle with interpretation, and the resulting narrative becomes something richer, more evocative, and more resonant than the original occurrence. In this gentle transformation, legends do not replace history. They enhance our understanding of perception, memory, and belief. They remind us that human experience is as much about how we interpret events as it is about the events themselves. And perhaps the most profound aspect of the story is its invitation to wonder. It asks no immediate action, no urgent decision, no fearful response. It encourages a quiet engagement with possibility, a patient exploration of what might exist beyond our maps, our records, and our assumptions. It offers a calm, contemplative space in which the mind can wander freely, unburdened by the need for certainty. In this sense, the man from Taured has left a legacy that extends far beyond the airport gates of Tokyo. He lives in every story that asks, gently, what if? He lives in every whispered retelling, every quiet debate, and every moment of reflection sparked by curiosity. He teaches that the universe, and our perception of it, is more layered than it first appears, that, even in the most ordinary moments, there is room for wonder, and that legends endure not because they are believed, but because they engage something essential in the human mind, the desire to explore, imagine, and reflect. And so, the story reaches its natural conclusion, not with a dramatic revelation, but with a quiet, persistent presence. The man from Taured will never appear on maps. He will never step again through the corridors of airports known to us. Yet his impact is enduring, residing in the spaces between fact and imagination, certainty and curiosity. The tale whispers that the world is always slightly larger than we perceive, and that in those subtle margins, stories, legends, and imagination flourish. In the end, the man from Taured teaches us about more than lost passports, impossible countries, or vanished travelers. He teaches us about patience, attention, and wonder. He reminds us that life is enriched not only by what is seen and measured, but also by what is felt, imagined, and quietly contemplated. He asks us to slow down, to notice the small anomalies, and to cherish the subtle mysteries that shape our perception of reality. And so, as we sit quietly, perhaps in the calm of evening, or the gentle half-light of dawn, we can imagine the man from Taured, walking through a world slightly out of step with our own. He carries nothing but his documents, his patience, and the quiet confidence of someone who knows that the world is larger, stranger, and more beautiful than it first appears. And in that imagining, we find the story's true gift, the gentle, enduring wonder of possibility. Reflections in the quiet. And now as the story drifts softly to its close, let us linger for a moment in the stillness it leaves behind. There is no sudden revelation, no sharp twist, no echoing applause. Instead, there is a calm space and an empty hallway of thought where imagination can stretch quietly, freely, without interruption. The man from Taured has vanished, but his story remains, like a faint scent carried on a late evening breeze, or the soft shimmer of a distant light just beyond the horizon. Perhaps that is the most enduring magic of this tale. It asks no more than gentle attention, no more than a willingness to pause and wonder. It invites us to look closer at the small irregularities in life. A map that seems slightly wrong, a memory that doesn't fully align, a stranger who seems just a little too sure of something we cannot see. Each moment becomes a doorway, a subtle reminder that the world contains more than what is immediately visible. Legends like this survive because they do not demand belief. They do not insist that the impossible is real. Instead, they offer a quiet invitation to curiosity, a chance to explore the spaces between certainty and imagination. In listening, we practice patience. In imagining, we practice openness. And in considering, even for a brief time, the possibility that the world may be slightly stranger than we think, we practice wonder. The man from Taured is not merely a tale of a lost passport or an invisible country. He is a reflection of our own fascination with the unknown, a mirror that shows how Azalia's story can grow, twist, and deepen when we meet it with openness. He reminds us that the line between fact and imagination is not always guarded by the world itself, but by our willingness to pause, notice, and think. So let this be the quiet ending, soft and unhurried. No need for finality, no need for answers. Just a gentle reflection on what it means to wonder, to notice, and to carry stories carefully in our minds. Let it rest there, a quiet companion to thoughts of possibility, curiosity, in calm exploration. And as you settle into the stillness, perhaps with the lights dimmed low and the world hushed around you, remember, the true magic of this story is not in proving the impossible. It is in opening the mind to the subtle, the strange, and the beautifully unknown. The story has ended, but the quiet wonder remains, lingering softly, like a memory of light in the corner of your mind. Sleep now with a mind open to mystery, and a heart ready to notice the quiet marvels waiting in each ordinary day.